we'll get to those bills after the subcommittee reports are completed. Just to remind the audience too, if you did not speak in subcommittee, or if you have an issue with an amendment or something like that that you do not have a chance to address, we'll allow individuals to come forward and provide testimony, but we don't want to rehash all the debate that was had in subcommittee. All right, first up is Delegate Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two subcommittee reports, actually. The first one is from Wednesday, January 25th.
Delegate Bell.
The first bill is House Bill 1661. Delegate Greason. Deals with the administration of medications to treat adrenal crisis. The summary is rather long. I don't know how detailed we want to be this morning, but Delegate Greason is here. He probably has a 25-cent version of that summary.
Delegate Greason, you want to give us the Cliff Note version?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that will not require anyone to go get additional training or figure out how to administer anything. What this bill simply says is three things. One, if there is someone at the school that is already trained to administer adrenal medicine, then the parent can let that person administer it. So that's part one. Part number two is if that person administers it, then that person is then relieved of any liability associated with it. So it's the Good Samaritan concept. And part number three is schools can decide if they want to, it's permissive, train someone within their school system or their school to administer the drug. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. It reported out of the subcommittee, I believe, unanimously, and I'll pass it back to the subcommittee chair.
Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, it was the recommendation of the subcommittee to report the bill on an 8-0 vote, and I would so move.
A motion and a second to report House Bill 1661. Any other members of the committee have any questions regarding the bill? Anyone in the audience wish to speak to the legislation that didn't address it in subcommittee? All those in favor of reporting House Bill 1661, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. Clerk shall close the roll. That bill is reported 13-0. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 1690, Delegate Dudenheffer. It's the Virginia Preschool Initiative. It removes, and local matching funds, removes the requirement for local governing bodies to commit to providing required matching funds in order to qualify for grants under the Virginia Preschool Initiative. It was the recommendation of the subcommittee to report the bill on an 8-0 vote. I will so move.
All right, there's a motion. A second to report House Bill 1690. Delegate Bell had a question about this one. Did anyone raise the fact that that had been the requirement for that program initially, and that to do so may have an impact from the standpoint of the funds available?
Mr. Chairman, I don't recall that being discussed, actually.
Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Dudenheffer.
Yes, sir. What we did discuss was the number of school districts that don't participate now that would be given an opportunity to participate. That don't have the money to actually match the grant.
Okay. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, Mr. Chairman, for either the subcommittee chair or from the patron associated with all those localities that have figured out how to match the money. Do they get their money back? Do they have an opportunity to decide in the future that they all of a sudden don't want to match it? Mr. Chairman, I think I understand the intent of the bill, but for all those localities that have already matched and will continue to match, I'm not sure I understand how this now becomes fair to let other people decide they don't need to match.
Delegate Dudenheffer.
Mr. Chairman, I think it allows, well, first off, it goes from this day forward. There isn't any reciprocity associated with it. The other, though, is that the there are many school districts that are participating now that will continue to participate. It just allows for more flexibility on the part of the school boards and affords for a much larger participation in many of the counties right now that are not participating.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up question?
Delegate Greason.
Mr. Chairman, my anticipation would be from this day going forward that no local divisions will match the funds any longer, and the program will run out of funds more quickly, would then require a larger appropriation, and we would not get the same outcome in the program as it was initially designed. So, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I might have a substitute motion.
And Delegate Greason, I was just discussing with Delegate Bell that I do have a note on this that it properly probably would be to report and refer to the Committee on Appropriations. I don't think Delegate Bell had that information.
Mr. Chairman, we do not have that.
So, all right,
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Delegate Dudenheffer.
I was asked to put this bill in by Prince William County School Board, and I think Mr. Council can address, we had a lengthy discussion this morning about whether those school districts that now participate would automatically not participate, and I'll let him speak for them, but it's his opinion that that is not going to happen in the future.
Mr.
Council.
Jim Council, representing Prince William Schools. And by the way, in subcommittee, we did not have the benefit of the fiscal impact statement, so I'd like to address a couple things in there. But we started with, and by the way, this is just not a Prince William specific bill. You've got some 30 eligible school divisions that are not participating. Prince William actually participates, if you add up Head Start, BPI, and BPI Plus, to the extent of about 50%. But we started, Mr. Chairman, Delegate Greason, with the premise, how can we get more kids in this program? Everybody seems to agree that it's very worthwhile, and yet we have about a third of the school divisions not participating, and probably about a third of eligible students not participating. So that was the premise with which we began. And Delegate Greason, to go to your question, I admit that we are assuming that those school divisions who recognize the value of this program enough to contribute the local match and get full participation, I agree that we assume they will continue to do so. But for those who, for any one of a number of reasons, have not elected to fully participate, if you look at it, this would allow them, with the state funding, to get at the statewide per pupil amount 2/3 of a kid more in than what they have now. So I don't have any evidence upon which to refute your suggestion, but I would just contend that if they're committed enough to it, to seek full eligibility now, they will continue to do so.
Mr. Council, let me follow up with one question. You know, there is a Virginia Preschool Initiative Joint Subcommittee that has been meeting. I don't believe there was a recommendation to do away with the match in the discussions over the last 2 years regarding that subcommittee. Is this come from just Prince William, or does this come from elsewhere?
It originated, actually it was my idea, if I may say so, on behalf of Prince William. But I was hoping Barry was here, who represents some of the teachers. He testified in subcommittee that it had been a topic in the School Readiness Commission Council. I'm not sure exactly what the name of it is. And that it got significant attention there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but not from the actual joint subcommittee
That's
that's
correct.
looking at the program.
That's correct.
All right. Well, we have a motion to report House Bill 1690.
Mr. Chairman, a substitute motion. A substitute motion.
Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we report and refer the bill to the Committee on Appropriations.
All right, is there a second? All right. That's been properly seconded. The substitute motion before us is to report and refer House Bill 1690 to the Committee on Appropriations. Any other members have discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion to report and refer House Bill 1690 to
Chairman, House Bill 1805, Delegate John Bell, requires each local school board that does not offer a full-day kindergarten program for each kindergarten student in the school division to develop a plan to fund and phase in a full-day kindergarten program for each kindergarten student in the division and submit the plan to the General Assembly in advance of the 2018 regular session. The recommendation from the subcommittee was to refer to appropriations on a voice vote, and I would so move.
Right, the recommendation from the subcommittee is to refer House Bill 1805 to the Committee on Appropriations, and it's been properly seconded. Any member of the committee have any questions on that vote? The way I understand the motion, and I believe that's just a voice vote. So all those in favor of referring House Bill 1805 to the Committee on Appropriations, please say aye. Those opposed? All right, that bill is referred to the Committee on Appropriations. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2395, Delegate Klein is the patron. Requires one reading specialist employed by each local school board to have training in the identification of the appropriate interventions, accommodations, and teaching techniques for students with dyslexia or related disorder, and to serve as an advisor on dyslexia and related disorders. The recommendation from the subcommittee was to report with one line amendment, and that was a 7-to-1 vote.
All right, let's take up the line amendment first. Ryan, could you report the line amendment for us, please?
Mr. Chairman, page 2 of the introduced bill on line 69, after local school board, insert comma, who is not employed as an administrator, comma.
Right. Tom, did you want to talk about the amendment? Okay. All right, everybody understand the amendment? Mr. Smith?
Thompson Superintendent's Association, I appreciate it, and I think I mentioned this also to Delegate Bell. We have some school divisions, my area primarily small school divisions, in which a reading specialist in the building may also have administrative duties because of the size of the school and what they do. And so I would be concerned that this might interfere with that.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Delegate Bell.
Mr. Smith brought that to my attention after our meeting, it makes some sense. I think that we'll see what the patron thinks, but the amendment that I suggested, it was my suggestion that we amend the bill. I'd like to prevent this shaping into some kind of hierarchy where we have a whole bunch of people who are advisors and we build another administrative position out of it. So,
Mr. Chairman. Delegate Klein.
May I, on the fly, suggest to address the gentleman's concerns that on the amendment prior to employed, we say solely employed as an administrator. Or,
Yeah, that, I think you have some in larger school divisions, and I'll reference Fairfax, that are employed to do that now. What you're trying to get at in terms of dyslexia, you may be an administrator for a large school system like Fairfax.
right.
So that might interfere with you.
Well, for a larger school division, Mr. Chairman, I would say that they have plenty of options available for who to designate as that individual. So I think if you add solely prior to employed, you would get at what Chairman Bell is trying to address.
We haven't adopted the amendment that was proposed in subcommittee. Delegate Bell? Delegate Klein? What's your pleasure?
I defer to the patron.
I would say that it addresses the concerns while doing no harm to the bill. And I would hope it would address the chairman's concerns, but if it doesn't, happy to work with you going forward.
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
All right, Ryan, can you read what that amendment would look like now?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Page 2 again, line 69, after school board, insert comma, who is not solely employed as an administrator, comma.
Okay. All right, is there questions on the amendment? Because this wasn't heard in subcommittee. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Actually, Michael Mullin, Fairfax County Schools, and we're a rather large school system. We have 187,000 students. We have in our special services department that deals with special education and other services, we actually have a number of people in that department that deal specifically, that would be considered dyslexia advisors to the entire school system. I think our concern is that even though we have those resources in place, that this language would actually preclude them from being considered our dyslexia advisor, even though they were specialists in the area. And we just want to make sure that we would be in compliance with that, even though they were actually, those positions are considered administrative positions because they oversee the entire program for the entire school system.
Delegate Klein?
Again, not having spoken with Fairfax County, I think they have plenty of individuals. This is just suggesting that they designate one to be the point of contact for dyslexia issues. Not hiring anybody new, not adding to the bureaucracy, I think was the goal of Chairman Bell. And we were happy to make that change to make sure that the bill is simply a point of contact for parents and teachers with questions about dyslexia. And Fairfax, all school divisions, Fairfax should be able to meet that requirement without any problem.
Right, Delegate Lingenfelter, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, just for the patron, Ben, how is this bill different from what we brought last year? Can you just...
Sure. Last year, we had a training requirement for all new teachers on the early signs of dyslexia. Thanks to Delegate Greason's leadership, we were able to get the funding for that upstairs. And so all new teachers coming in are going to be able to identify early signs. This is a little different in that in some smaller school divisions and in divisions where a lot of people seem to know a lot about this issue, teachers and parents with questions need a point of contact, and this would be more of an official point of contact within each school division so that everybody can point in the same direction and say, here's where you go with answers.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Lingenfelter?
this sounds like you're simply building logically on the foundation that we put in last year. And I would just say, Mr. Chairman, it's a personal point. I had dyslexia as a young child, and for the kid, you don't know what's going on. You don't understand what is happening unless you have someone who can do an early intervention and get you tracked right to get the sort of remediation that you need in order to deal with it. It's a very tough thing. So I applaud the patron for his work in this area. I really
Right. Are these, Delegate Bulova, is the question related to the amendment we've not adopted? Okay, Delegate Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess a question for the patron, or maybe for Mr. Malloy, because I do want to be sensitive, even though Fairfax County and others are very large school districts. I don't believe in wasting resources when you don't have to waste resources. And I guess my question comes down to the definition of an administrator, because what I heard Mr. Malloy say is that these are specialists. In my mind, that is not what I would traditionally consider an administrator, and I wanted to make sure that that definition is somehow addressed elsewhere in the code to make sure that we're not having Fairfax County having to hire other people just because of the difference between an administrator versus a specialist.
Mr. Malloy.
I think Delegate Bulova hits the issue exactly right, is we do have these resources in place. We just want to make sure that by this definition, that those resources we have in place don't inadvertently get defined out of being basically as counting as this kind of advisor. We have probably half a dozen or more people who specialize in this area, so we just want to make sure they be counted.
Ryan, do we define specialist as administrative standard personnel related to the standards of quality?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any definition we have in the code of administrator that would provide any clarity to it. In terms of how they're funded, I would have to look into that a little bit more. I can't tell you how.
Okay. All right, any other questions on the amendment? Delegate Keen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I wasn't in the subcommittee, so I'm reading this for the first time, but it seems to me that the word specialist also exists in code. If you look at line 67 of Delegate Klein's bill, there's already a requirement that there be a specialist. So we're not creating a new definition of specialist by Delegate Klein's bill, that we're just referring back to the specialist that's ought to be in place. And so I don't think that should be confusion at all. And obviously I'm from Fairfax County, but if you read the fiscal impact statement that describes the bill, it talks about how if you already have a designated person, then this really wouldn't affect you at all. So I think the intent of the bill would be protecting larger counties like Fairfax County, and to the extent that there are smaller jurisdictions that don't have it, this would be a requirement for them. And so I think that's the way the language is to me, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other questions on the amendment? Everybody understand the amendment? All those in favor of adopting the amendment to House Bill 2395, please say aye. Aye. All right, those opposed? All right, Delegate Bell, what was the recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, the recommendation was to report with one line amendment. I would, on behalf of the subcommittee, I'd recommend that we report the bill as amended.
All right, there's a motion and a second to report House Bill 2395 as amended. Any other members of the committee have a question? Any member of the audience didn't have a chance to speak in subcommittee wish to do so? All those in favor of reporting as amended House Bill 2395, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. All members voted. Clerk will close the roll. That bill's reported 17 to 1. Thank you, Delegate Klein. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2406, Delegate Fillercorn, requires any family life education curriculum offered in any elementary school, middle school, or high school to include instruction on the importance of personal privacy and personal boundaries of other individuals, and tools for a student to use to ensure that he respects the personal privacy and personal boundaries of other individuals. It was the recommendation of the subcommittee to report the bill on a 7-to-1 vote, and I would so move.
All right, the recommendation of the subcommittee was to report House Bill 2406, and it's been properly seconded. Delegate Fillercorn, I believe you told me there was a speaker that didn't get a chance to address this in subcommittee, so we'd like to hear from them at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, and actually, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Bell. I appreciate the time, and I don't want to take too much time, because I know we have had full hearing in subcommittee. There is one individual who's here from the community who did not have the opportunity to testify in this bill and would like to do so, and can do so in just a few minutes. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd like to call Brandon Fartstein at this time.
Yes, please come forward.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brandon Fartstein. I am 17 and a student in Henrico County. I have a very rare form of dwarfism, which obviously not only results in what you see before you, but some very difficult peer situations, not only at school, but in the world around me. So I'm going to tell you a little situation. I was a junior at a school in Henrico County, Deep Run, one of the best schools in the nation. I want you to imagine being told by not 1, not 10, not 20, hundreds of kids, if you don't kill yourself, you're going to be killed. Let me tell you this. If I did not have the courage and everything that my life does have, I would not be standing before you. How much is too much? That we need to open a newspaper and we need to see case after case of suicide, of tragedy in a school. So this bill specifically teaches kids at a very young age what empathy proper social media and technology use is. Because as my generation gets older and older, social media and technology is getting more and more accessible. So we're seeing 7, 8, 9-year-olds who have phones, who have multiple social media accounts. So this specific bill would tell kids, again, at a very young age, what appropriate use is. And I guarantee would save so many lives. And this is just a one way of doing so. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We do have a motion to report that was recommended by the subcommittee, 7 to 1, has been seconded. Any members of the committee have any questions regarding the legislation?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Livingston, did you speak in subcommittee? Okay, Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quite frankly, there is little that I can add to the previous speaker. The Virginia Education Association fully supports this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Neil, did I hear somebody, one of the members wanted to be recognized?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate LaRock.
Yeah, I would just like to explain the no vote that I'm going to cast, and that I have a very strong distrust of requiring school districts to form policies on personal privacy when there's obviously a high level of confusion about what personal privacy is, as evidenced by the controversy over bathroom policies. That's pretty much what I wanted to add to the conversation.
Thanks, Delegate LaRock. Any other discussion? All those in favor of reporting House Bill 2406, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. All members voted. Clerk will close the roll. That bill reports 16-3. Thank you, Delegate. All right, that's the first, I believe, first.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the first subcommittee report.
Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Massey.
before we move on to the next subcommittee report, it's my understanding that the Chairman Jones sent us a letter, and that the bill that we just reported, House Bill 2395, he would like to come up to appropriations. So, Mr. Chairman, having voted on the prevailing side by which we reported House Bill 2395, I move that we reconsider that vote.
All right, there's a motion and a second to reconsider the vote by which we reported House Bill 2395. And I was just alerted to the fact that that is in fact the case. And I apologize for not having that information before me at the time. All right, any questions on that, on the motion to reconsider? All right, all those in favor of reconsidering the vote by which we reported 2395, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. The bill is before us. Delegate Massey.
I have a substitute motion.
Actually, be the
Well,
motion.
I have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we report and refer House Bill 2395 to the Committee on Appropriations.
All right, is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and properly seconded to report and refer House Bill 2395 to the Committee on Appropriations as amended. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of reporting and referring House Bill 2395 to the Committee on Appropriations, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. The clerk shall close the roll. That bill reports and refers 18-2. Thank you, Delegate Massey. All right, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee report from Friday, January 27th, with your permission, I can take care of some housekeeping that will help us expedite here.
Delegate Bell.
As the patron of House Bill 1534 and 1536, I would ask that those bills go by for the day.
At the request of the patron and the subcommittee chairman, he's moving that House Bill 1534 and 1536 go by for the day.
Yes.
All right. Which means we'll take these up on Wednesday. All those in favor of the motion to pass by for the day, House Bill 1534 and 1536, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, those bills have gone by for the day. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2054, Delegate Corey has asked that her bill go by for the day as well, and I would so move.
Second. All right, there's a motion and properly second that House Bill 2054 go by for the day. Any questions on that legislation? All right, all those in favor of House Bill 2054 going by for the day, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that bill goes by for the day. Delegate Bell.
And Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2205, Delegate Scully, at the request of a patient, he has requested that we strike the bill, and I would so move.
Second. There's a motion at the request of the patron to strike House Bill 2205. Any questions on that motion? It's been properly seconded. All those in favor of striking House Bill 2205, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, that bill is stricken. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 1914, Delegate Head. Again, I don't know if Delegate Head's here or not. We have a very lengthy summary, which I'll be glad to read for you. It requires each individual who's elected or appointed to a school board to submit the fingerprinting and provide personal descriptive information to be forwarded along with his fingerprints by the school board through the Central Criminal Records Exchange to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the purpose of obtaining criminal history record information and to provide written consent and the necessary personal information to the school board to obtain a search of the registry of found complaints of child abuse and neglect maintained by the Department of Social Services, and to take reasonable steps to obtain information from each state in which the individual has resided within the prior 5 years to determine whether such individual is the subject of a founded complaint of child abuse and neglect in any state. The bill precludes any individual who is found to have been convicted of a felony or any offense involving sexual molestation, physical or sexual abuse, or rape of a child in the Commonwealth, or an equivalent offense in another state, or the subject of a found complaint of child abuse and neglect in the Commonwealth or another state from serving on any school board. The bill requires each entity that administers the school board election or appointment process for each local school division to notify each prospective school board member of the foregoing requirements. The recommendation from the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, was to refer this bill to privileges and elections as a substitute, and we did that on a voice vote. And I would submit.
Well, we would have to adopt the substitute, I believe, if that's what your all's recommendation was. Delegate Bell, let me ask a question. Why did the subcommittee determine that this would go to privileges and elections?
I think the rationale, Mr. Chairman, was that it involves elected officials and potential qualifications for elected officials.
Delegate Cole,
Yeah,
the chairman of the privileges and elections.
as I recall, it was because it dealt with qualifications to appear on the ballot.
All right. Well, let's adopt the substitute. Any questions on the substitute? It just makes technical changes, I'm assuming. Second. All right. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the substitute for House Bill 1914. All those in favor of adopting the substitute, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. The motion then Delegate Bell is making on behalf of the subcommittee is
to refer to privileges and elections.
all right. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded that we refer the bill to the Committee on Privileges and Elections. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of, yes. appreciate my fellow chairman reminding me. All those in favor of referring House Bill 1914 to the Committee on Privileges and Elections, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that bill is referred to the Committee on Privileges and Elections. Delegate Bell.
House Bill 1924, Delegate Bagby is the patron. Deals with public schools and suspensions, directs the Board of Education to establish guidelines for alternatives to short-term and long-term suspension for consideration by local school boards. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to report the bill on an 8-0 vote. So moved.
Second. All right, there's a motion that's been properly seconded that House Bill 1924 be reported. Any member of the committee have any questions on this legislation?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Greason.
Mr. Chairman, I would wonder if the subcommittee chair or the patron could describe, I believe this patron had a bill similar to this last year, and I was wondering if he could describe the differences between that bill and this piece of legislation.
Yes, this one is.
Delegate Bagby.
Mr. Chair, this one is much, much better.
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Greason.
follow-up question? Could the patron please outline specifically the differences and how this bill is better?
So, I'll be frank with you. Last year, I had a number of bills dealing with suspensions, and they had the flu. And this one, I think, was one that I think you worked on a little bit with me as well, along with folks from the administration and Department of Ed. But this one came out of this body with limited no votes. But when it got over to the floor, it caught the cold from the other ones. And so what I did was I didn't bring the other ones forward this year so we could focus on this one, which is one that we all worked on to make sure that it was something that we could all agree on. And so it is basically the same bill, but it's not accompanied by any stick bills.
All right, Delegate Greason, anyone else have any questions? All right, anyone in the audience that didn't speak on this legislation wish to speak so, that didn't speak in subcommittee? All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 1924, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. Clerk will close the roll. All right, that bill reports. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2140, Delegate LaMunyon, involves an exit questionnaire dealing with teacher turnover. It requires the superintendent of public instruction, in order to track and make public the rate of and reasons for teacher turnover, to develop and provide to local school divisions an exit questionnaire for teachers, require each school board member, each school board to administer such questionnaire to each exiting teacher, and to provide the results of each such questionnaire to the Department of Education, and report annually to the Governor, the House Committee on Education, and the Senate Committee on Education and Health, the rate of and reasons for teacher turnover based on the results of such questionnaires. Mr. Chairman, there is a substitute, and I would move the substitute.
Second. All right, any questions on the substitute? All those in favor of adopting the substitute for House Bill 2140, please say aye. All those opposed, the substitute is before us. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, it was the recommendation of the subcommittee to report as a substitute on an 8-0 vote, and I would so move.
Second. All right, there's a motion, and it's been properly seconded that we report the substitute for House Bill 2104. Any member of the committee have any questions? Anyone in the audience that didn't get a chance to speak on the bill in subcommittee wish to do so? All right, all those in favor of reporting the substitute for House Bill 2140, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise.
Chairman, House Bill 2257, Delegate Fillicorn, requires any high school family life education curriculum offered by a local school division to incorporate age-appropriate elements of effective and evidence-based programs on consent. There is a line amendment, and the subcommittee recommended reporting with the line amendment on an 8-0 vote.
Ryan, can you report the line amendment for us, please?
Mr. Chairman, line 19, after too little I, insert the law and meaning of.
Ryan, can you say that again?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, it would be on line 19 of the original bill after the two little i's, inserting the law and meaning of, so it would be to the law and meaning of consent.
Okay, everybody understand that amendment? All right. Delegate Bell's moved, and it's been seconded that we adopt the amendment. All those in favor of adopting that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'm a little against this one, Ryan, so if you could read that now, how that line will read, 19 after a little while.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess starting on line 18, that the curriculum shall incorporate age-appropriate elements of effective and evidence-based programs on to the law and meaning of consent.
Okay. All right, any other members have questions about the bill? Delegate Bell, what the recommendation was?
The recommendation was to report as amended on an 8-0 vote. So moved.
All right, there's a motion, is it seconded? Seconded, okay. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could ask the patron to step forward and ask her a
Delegate
question.
Fillicorn.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Fillicorn, you've done a lot of work in this area. Since we're going to ask the school divisions to incorporate age-appropriate elements, knowing, as you do know, I have a freshman girl and a 6th grade girl who will be coming through the public school system and will be taking these courses when they get to high school. As a father of 2 daughters, I react directly to the word consent and what I think that means. How does this get developed? The substitute now gives me a sense that someone is going to talk about the law and then talk about the meaning of consent. Is that term defined in the code today? And or how will that curriculum be developed so that I understand as a father ultimately what my daughters will be receiving in that education?
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Fillicorn.
Delegate Chairman Greason. Yes, there's, it would vary, and currently there are materials that are available that will be shared, but it's also up to the local school division as well to introduce their own age-appropriate evidence-based programming as we talk about consent as it relates specifically to permission. And now with the amendment, if I might add too, what we're focusing on too is not just consent as permission, but also the law of, and what constitutes, what is part of the law, in an effort to teach our kids not just permission as we move forward, yes, but also no, and how to prevent issues occurring at a later time, potentially, that may be in, as it relates specifically to the law, not just with what permission, how you define permission.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up question.
Delegate Greason.
Mr. Chairman, I often try to be lighthearted about this, but this is not a lighthearted comment, so I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to be funny here. When I was going through school, Delegate Fillicorn, probably around the same time that you were, the phrase was very seriously, no means no, right? That's what we are all taught, that's what that means. Is that still kind of the thought process and the meaning when I think about my daughters? And to be honest with you, I hadn't thought about Jenna being a freshman and going through this course here until about 5 minutes ago. So is that still kind of the gist of what we're trying to do, or is it so far more advanced at that I'm out of touch and I need to go have a one-on-one with my daughter and figure out what's going on here?
Mr. Chairman? Yes, definitely. You know, there still is a fair amount of focus on no means no, yes means yes, but I think it goes beyond that and also teaching permission in an age-appropriate manner. So we're talking about teaching this differently with different examples, as already is the case currently in the FLE program, in an age-appropriate manner. So again, you know, it's focusing on consent as we discuss and define permission, but also now we will be also focusing on the law and the meaning of consent based in the law. As we have all witnessed and seen and heard of many different examples and issues as of late, and I think relating it back to the law is important as well.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Question. Delegate Philicorn, what is the law regarding consent? Can you cite the chapter and verse in the code and trying to understand how the Board of Education would help our schools then determine what that law is and how they would teach that to the young people? And I have a teenager as well and familiar with the family life education curriculum. I'm just trying to understand what code sections we would be referring to and then how they would teach those to our young people.
And I think if I might, Mr. Chairman, I believe there is, I think Cindy Cave is here, the Board of Ed as well.
Dr. Cave.
Good morning, Cindy Cave, and good morning, Chair and members of the committee. And the question is, what is currently in the law in terms of the definition of consent? And I can't tell you that in terms of what is exactly in the law and if consent is defined or not. I'm happy to look at that, but at this moment I can't.
Okay. Delegate Lemunyan, you believe you can clarify my question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just by way of background, the amendment that was recommended by the subcommittee is language that came out of a conversation that the patron and I had with the chairman of the courts committee, Delegate Albo. And don't hold me to it, but I believe he said that consent is a defined term in Title 18, which is the criminal section of the code. And one of the aims of this language is to point out that even though a consensual relationship among people of high school age, that depending upon their age, even if it is consensual, it could be illegal in Virginia. And that was really one of the things that we wanted pointed out in this family life education class. And I think that was one of the reasons why the subcommittee went with this change.
Okay. Delegate Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess building on what Delegate Lemunyan was just saying, it's not just no versus or no means no. It's not just about permission. It also has a lot to do with the ability to give consent. And so when you add drugs or alcohol into the mix, it makes it much more complicated. Our colleges and universities already do this, and there is a great body of law out there that establishes consent to the degree that it can be very confusing. I think making sure that we take the opportunity here to define that and make sure our students understand what that is, I think is an extraordinarily laudable goal.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Delegate Philicorn.
As I mentioned earlier, right, it's not, yes, part of this is all about teaching permission and from the vantage point of our students, but it's also about preventing and also teaching no means no. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I think focusing on what the law is and what appropriate behavior is all part of this. And rather than wait again until our students, our children are in college, that is obviously far too late. So the education process needs to begin earlier.
Right. Delegate Lingenfelter.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I support this bill, and I think that the amendment that we have done actually does make sense. I will say that on reflection, it might have been good to have courts look at this, but I think that this amendment is sufficient for where we are now. But we are introducing a somewhat new concept into the requirements to sort of teach the law, if you will. And I know we do driver's ed and other things. I'm not trying to trivialize that. I think this is a good amendment. But you could see more of this. I mean, honestly, we could see more of these kinds of solutions that say the schools are going to have to educate kids in the law. You know, well, that's not completely bad, particularly in serious topics like this one, okay? But it does give me a little concern because whereas I hope that many of our young students will be inclined to enter the legal field, you know, I'm just concerned about the precedent. But I'm going to support this bill because it's a very serious topic.
Cindy, can you come back up, please? Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, and I could be very wrong, and that's why I'm asking the question. Other than instructing on the Constitution and our founding documents, in family life education, do we teach the legal meaning of any of these other categories? We talk about evidence-based programs, domestic abuse, dating violence, sexual harassment. Do we go back and cite code sections or teach the legal ramifications related to any of those subjects in family life education as part of the curriculum now?
The way that it's presented at the state level and the board standards, those terms are provided in the family life education standards without definitions associated with them. However, school divisions have the opportunity, looking at those standards, saying that you need to teach about preventing dating abuse and so forth. And the school divisions have the flexibility to look at their curriculum materials and teach according to their decision making. So if a school division would want to refer to the law, and they could, there would nothing that would prevent them to do that.
Cindy, then follow-up question. This would be the first time that we've actually cited specific law as a reference to teaching in the curriculum. Is that not correct?
Currently in the family life education document standards, we don't say teaching the law, no sir.
Okay, thank you. All right. We have before us motion to report as amended House Bill 2257. Any other members of the committee have questions? Any member of the audience that hasn't spoken on this legislation in subcommittee wish to do so? All those in favor of reporting House Bill 2257, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed, do likewise. Clerk will close the roll. That bill reports 15 to 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
All right, Delegate Bell.
House Bill 2282, Delegate Ledwidge, requires each school board to ensure that each guidance counselor and school nurse that it employs receives training on the prevention of trafficking of children using awareness and training materials provided by the Board of Education and the Department of Social Services. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to report the bill on an 8-0 vote, and I would so move.
Second. All right, there was a motion and a second as a recommendation of the subcommittee to report House Bill 2282. Any other questions related to that bill? All right, anyone in the audience that hadn't spoken on that legislation in subcommittee wish to do so? All right. All those in favor of reporting House Bill 2282, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. Clerk will close the roll. That bill is reported 17 to 0. All right, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2290, Delegate Ward, requires each driver education program in the public school system to include instruction concerning traffic stops, including law enforcement procedures for traffic stops, appropriate actions to be taken by drivers during traffic stops, and appropriate interactions with law enforcement officers and initiate traffic stops. The recommendation was to report the bill on a 4-3 vote, and I would so move, Mr. Chairman. I would also add that I think maybe the reason for the closeness of the vote was because a lot of us thought that this was already being done in driver education, but the testimony we received in the subcommittee was somewhat to the contrary.
All right, and the recommendation was to report, and you moved that?
Yes, sir.
All right, and it's been seconded? Second. All right. Delegate Ward, did you want to add anything else?
No, I thought someone was going to be here to testify, but he's over in the Senate side. But if I don't,
But Delegate Ward, since it was a close vote in subcommittee, why don't you explain the bill a little bit, and then we'll see if we have any questions.
okay, all right. If you look at the bill on lines about 17, 18, you see what's included in the driver's education curriculum, and it includes alcohol, drug abuse, aggressive driving, distracted driving, motorcycle awareness, organ and tissue donation awareness, fuel-efficient driving practices. But there is nothing listed here in that curriculum, in the code, that talks about traffic stops and that proper interaction with law enforcement from the young drivers. Being pulled over is one of the scariest things that anyone faces, even as an adult. And for a young driver, you get really nervous. You're not quite sure what to do. As a matter of fact, if you look at YouTube videos or go on the internet, all kinds of misinformation is out there. And so what we want to make sure is that all of our young drivers are on the same page, and that a simple traffic stop won't blow up into something more serious because you didn't know what to do and the driver just did not know what to do. It's a scary time for young drivers, and there are people who have programs in place. Private driving school will tell their young drivers one thing. Even the Attorney General's office has come up with a kind of a workshop. So it seems like it's easy enough for us to put it all together, make sure that it's in the driver's education curriculum so that all young drivers driving on the roads of Virginia know what to do if they are pulled over. And it will kind of keep down some apprehension and allow the stop to just go on without anything getting any more serious because a young driver did something incorrectly.
Delegate Ward. Delegate Lindsay.
Speaking to the bill at the appropriate time.
Let's see if anybody has any questions first, and then we'll come back to members who just want to speak to the bill. Any other committee members have questions on the legislation? All right, seeing none. Delegate Lindsay.
I started my career as a assistant Commonwealth's attorney, and I've been a defense attorney for a number of years. And there have been countless incidents that I've had the obligation of either representing the Commonwealth or representing charged defendants where people made a simple situation a whole lot worse simply because of lack of knowledge. Cases where, something as simple as someone believing that they have the right to drive home as opposed to stopping immediately, or drive to a lighted location as opposed to pulling off at the earliest location, in which they've been engaged by law enforcement. So I see this measure as being very timely and very important in terms of having people have a real appreciation as to what they're supposed to do, as opposed to what they've been told or they assume they should do.
All right, any other members of the committee have any questions? Or Delegate LaRock?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at page 25 of the Virginia Driver's Education Manual,
stopped by a police officer, remain calm. Pull your vehicle to the side of the road in a safe location and park, and there's probably, I would say, a good 15 or 20 bullet points, which seem to be exactly what we're proposing this bill would do. It exists in the driver's manual presently.
Okay. Is there anyone that deals with driver's education that's, I guess, in the room? I guess the question is, does it do any harm if it's already in there anyway? Delegate Pogge.
Well, actually, it is in the manual, but what we're suggesting here is that it be covered in the instruction program, and there seems to be concern that it's not covered in that section of the manual. I'm not asking to rewrite the manual. We're just asking that it's covered in the driver training portion.
Okay, Cindy, did you want to address that? And then Delegate Yancey.
I just wanted to provide some information to the committee. Our standards of learning, driver education standards of learning for Virginia public schools, provide that that drivers understand responsibilities associated with the driving privilege, and they include interaction with law enforcement. But some of the specific things that Delegate Ward has discussed are not included in that instruction. It does have some information concerning traffic stops, but not as comprehensive as what Delegate Ward has referred to.
Okay. Delegate Breeson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support this fine bill because it puts the concept into the Code of Virginia versus just in the driver training manual that could change from year to year. I think it's a very important topic. The patrons brought this forward to us. Delegate Lindsay has brought up some good points, and I'd like to see it in the code as written here versus just in the driver manual, so I'll be supporting the bill.
All right, the motion before us is to report House Bill 2290. Any other members have questions or statements? Anybody in the audience that didn't get a chance to speak in subcommittee? All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 2290, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. Clerk will close the roll. That bill reports 17 to 1.
Thank you.
Delegate Ward.
Thank you.
Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2355, Delegate Pogge, requires school boards to make advanced placement and preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship qualifying test examinations available to students receiving home instruction, adopt written policies that specify the date by which such students shall register to participate in such examinations, and notify such students and their parents of such registration deadline and the availability of financial assistance to low-income and needy students to take such examinations. It was the recommendation of the subcommittee to report the bill on an 8-0 vote, and I so move.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to report House Bill 2355. Delegate Pogge, did you want to say anything about your bill?
Yes, I do. I want to clarify that this is not new legislation. This is simply clarifying the code. Existing law was passed in 2005, again in 2006 with clarifications, and we're clarifying again now because some of the language was obsolete and that the name of the tests have been changed. So what we're making sure and clear is the intent of the General Assembly that Virginia local school boards make the advanced placement and the PSET and then SUT examinations available in a consistent and timely manner to students receiving home education. The intent was clear in 05 and 06, and now we're just clarifying it again in 17.
All right, any other members of the committee have questions regarding House Bill 2355? Anybody in the audience that didn't get a chance to speak in subcommittee? All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 2355, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed, please do likewise. And clerk will close. Light touch, Delegate Massey, light touch.
Mr. Chairman, that completes my subcommittee reports.
And Delegate Bill, I believe that completes your agenda for the first part of the session.
Indeed it does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me thank the subcommittee and you for the great work that you all have done. You all expedited, and I appreciate that. All right.
Especially, if I might,
Delegate Bill.
special thanks should go to our staff. They've done incredible work helping us get through all this.
They have, and they've turned it around very quickly. All right. The next subcommittee report we have is Delegate Greason. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our subcommittee met in a special meeting on Thursday at 7 a.m. Public address announcement. Tuesday's meeting will be at 7 a.m. as well, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder to the audience, the first bill in the subcommittee to report is House Bill 1400, Delegate Dickey Bell. We've heard this bill many times before. This is the Virginia Virtual School. It's a standalone virtual education bill. Delegate Bell's done wonderful work over several years to create an option for true choice in the Commonwealth. It establishes the Board of Virginia Virtual School, the board, as a policy agency in the executive branch of state government for the purpose of governing the full-time virtual school programs offered to students enrolled in the Virginia Virtual School programs. Mr. Chairman, we had a very good and thorough debate on this bill and other bills relating to this topic. The recommendation of the subcommittee on House Bill 1400 was to report and refer to the Committee on Appropriations on a 6-2 vote, and I so move.
All right, there's a motion. It's been seconded, properly seconded, to report and refer House Bill 1400 to the Committee on Appropriations. Delegate Bell, do you want to add anything?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any member of the committee have any questions? Any member of the audience that hasn't spoken on this legislation wish to speak? All those in favor of reporting and referring House Bill 1400 to the Committee on Appropriations, please record your vote. All those no, do likewise. All right, that bill's reported and referred 13-6. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill is House Bill 1414, Delegate Austin. This bill deals with the end of course and end of grade assessments and receiving partial credit on those assessments. Mr. Chairman, as you know, there are many tests that ask questions and say, please indicate the multiple yes or correct answers. If the student doesn't get all of the multiple correct answers selected, they don't get any credit at all. So this would provide that when an end of course or end of grade assessment is scored, any student who provides a correct answer on at least one part of a multi-part assessment question shall be awarded the appropriate amount of partial credit for that question. Mr. Chairman, there was two other components of this bill when originally submitted that would have required it to go to appropriations. So the subcommittee adopted a substitute, and I moved the substitute.
Second. There's a motion and a second to adopt the substitute for House Bill 1414. Any questions regarding that? All those in favor of adopting the substitute for House Bill 1414, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the adopted substitute is before us. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The substitute was a pared-down version that would, I think, accomplish what the subcommittee and the patron wanted to do, and the subcommittee therefore recommended reporting the substitute 8-0, and I so move.
All right, there's a motion and a second to report the substitute for House Bill 1414. Any members of the committee have any questions? Any member of the audience that hasn't spoken wish to do so? All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 1414, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. Please record your vote. All those yes, all those no. All right, that bill's reported 19-0. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill is House Bill 1663. It was one of my bills dealing with computer science in the Commonwealth. The original bill as submitted is completely different, so I would bring the members' attention to the substitute that is before you in your packet, and I would move the substitute to put it in the proper position for us to discuss.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the substitute for House Bill 1663. All those in favor of adopting the substitute, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, substitute for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, you may remember that in last year's budget, we allocated $550,000 in year one of the budget and $550,000 in year two of the budget to provide training and professional development for teachers in the area of computer science. The budget was relatively generic in its description on what that would be, and this bill is an attempt to clarify how that money might be spent in advancing the training and professional development in teachers in this very important arena. Mr. Chairman, as you and other members know, China as an individual country is creating 2 million cyber warriors per year. The United States of America is graduating 38,000 from the AP Computer Science test. So 2 million computer cyber warriors against 38,000 here in the United States. We need to continue to focus on computer science, and this bill attempts to do that. There's an organization in the Commonwealth called Code VA that does really, really good work and has done a lot in helping us advance our thoughts in computer science and coding, computational thinking, etc. This bill does two things. One, it allocates or requires the Northern Virginia Community College, who has raised their hand to be a very active participant, shall contract with a non-profit organization to develop, market, implement high-quality and effective computer science training and professional development. So that is the first part of the bill. The second part of the bill is for the community college to establish an advisory committee for the purpose of advising the college and its nonprofit partner on how we might do this over time. And so we've got some good industry advice, a good partnership, and I think this ended up being a very good compromise of a bill that we've been working on for almost a year. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the substitute, and at the appropriate time, there is a clarifying line amendment to the substitute that I would like to offer.
Delegate Greason, can you suspend on this bill and move forward? I've got a question from a technical standpoint that I need to clarify with staff. Can you move on to the next one, then we'll come back to this one?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, no problem. I'll suspend on House Bill 1663 and move to the next bill in my report, which is House Bill 1708, Delegate Fillercorn. This bill requires that the Board of Education to include in the student outcome measures included in the standards of accreditation the number of industry certification credentials as defined in relevant law obtained by high school students. Mr. Chairman, we spent a lot of time talking about pathways and making sure that every child who goes through the school system has a rewarding and appropriate pathway for them to follow. CTE is a big part of that. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to report, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, there's a substitute that we should move and accept.
All right, Delegate Greason moves and it's been seconded that we adopt a substitute for House Bill 1708. Any questions on that? All those in favor of adopting the substitute for House Bill 1708, please say aye. All those opposed, substitute for Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The recommendation of the subcommittee was to report the substitute 8-0, and I so move.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we report the substitute for House Bill 1708. Any member of the committee have any questions? All right. Any member of the audience wish to speak on that legislation that hasn't spoken? All right. All those in favor of reporting House Bill, substitute for House Bill 1708, please record your vote on the electronic voting system. All those opposed do likewise. Clerk will close the roll. That bill reports 19-0. Delegate Greason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next bill is House Bill 1764, Delegate Bulova. This is the second bill in the series of virtual bills that we heard. There is a substantial substitute in your packet, and to put it in the proper posture, I would move the substitute.
All right. There's been a motion and a second to adopt the substitute for House Bill 1764. All those in favor of adopting the substitute, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right. Substitutes before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, because the substitute is pretty substantial in the form of a rewrite, I might offer the patron Delegate Bulova to spend just a minute explaining the substitute. We did hear this thoroughly in subcommittee, so I don't think we need to take any additional comments from the floor, but if I could give Delegate Bulova just a minute to summarize, I think that might be helpful to the members.
Delegate Bulova.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just really quickly in terms of background, after the veto of House Bill 8 last year, Secretary Trent pulled together stakeholders to look at how we would move virtual education forward in Virginia. The first version dealt with regional collaboration, and after sitting down and working through, what we came up with, I think, is much more simple, much more streamlined, and that's what you have before you today. What the bill has in common with Delegate Bell's bill is that it does answer the question that I do get from constituents, and that's for whatever reason they want to have access to virtual education. So whether that's disabilities or focus area or bullying, and these same parents that were very nervous about relying on contracts among localities, and what happens if another school district decides not to pursue or continue a contract. Where the bill is different is that rather than creating a new statewide bureaucracy, it very simply mandates that each local school division will provide a full-time option. And so this has a couple of different advantages the way that I see it. So first of all, it makes sure that each student has a full-time option. Since the student will still be a member of the local school district, they are still eligible to participate in all the support and extracurricular activities. It does eliminate the question of constitutionality, and so I know that there's ongoing debate about that. I guess the worst of all worlds is we could move forward with something and then have it declared unconstitutional. This definitely makes sure that we are constitutional in terms of the ground, and that it doesn't create a whole new bureaucracy. I think that the key here is, again, that it does mandate that each school division provide a full-time virtual education option. There are 3 ways that this can be done under the substitute. So divisions have always had the option of providing their own full-time program. That doesn't change. They can contract with one or more multi-division online providers to deliver these services, or they can band together with other divisions to enter into a contract together. I think the innovative part here, or the new part, is dealing with the contracting. And so again, a locality can enter into a contract with one of these multi-division online providers now. That's certainly currently the case, but the real key part, if you look at line 137, is that the department actually takes the initiative to negotiate favorable rates with these multi-online division providers that any division can opt into. And so think of it this way, is that they're going to develop these contracts. Any division can hop onto these, and so it completely streamlines the process. So you've got economies of scale that you can take advantage of, and it means that each division doesn't have to go through the process of developing their own contracts. That means that the standards of learning, standards of quality, accreditations, they've already been built through there with through the Department of Education. I won't go through a lot of the other details. I will note that one area that we do continuously get tripped up on is the funding aspect. And so I think that's another strength here, is that rather than having to worry about what school divisions pay what percentage, it's relatively simple because this is local. This is based in your local school division. The locality would continue to provide their share, and they would continue to receive the state share. If they do decide to work with other localities, the idea isn't to micromanage that. So if Fairfax wants to work with Loudoun, or if Fairfax wants to work with Fairfax City, or Albemarle and Charlottesville, they can work out the arrangements. We don't have to come in and tell them exactly how to do that. So anyways, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill in a nutshell. I know we have Secretary Trent and Cindy Cave and Holly Coy who have all worked very hard on this as well. I'm sure they'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
All right, Delegate Pogge has a question.
I do have a question. My question is, since the students who will be taking online learning at home, will they be allowed to participate in high school sports in the VSHL since they are homeschooled students?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer that question. They would still be students at their local school, elementary, middle, or high school. And so from, I think, that perspective, even though they're getting their virtual education at home, they are still full-fledged members of their local school district, and I would imagine would be eligible in order to go ahead and participate in VHSL. And I believe when VHSL came and spoke to us at the very beginning of the session, they acknowledged that this was an issue that they're working on to make sure that it's done seamlessly. But that's my understanding, is that they are members of that local school.
All right, any other questions for Delegate Bulova or the subcommittee chairman? And Delegate Lingenfeld.
Ryan, just to be clear, is participation in one of these regional virtual opportunities considered enrollment? In other words, do you have to be enrolled? I see, Mr. Chairman, that some knowledgeable people in the audience are shaking their head, yes, you would be considered enrolled. Would that be the legal opinion here?
Mr. Brimmer, our legal advisor.
Mr. Chairman, yes, the intent of this bill is to ensure that a student who enrolls in one of these full-time virtual programs would remain a student enrolled in their local school district.
So final question.
Delegate Lingenfeld.
So if I am a homeschooler who has enrolled in a virtual regional construct, I am considered enrolled in public school also.
Mr. Brewer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is a full-time program, so that would assume they were taking at least 5 courses, in which case they would be a full-time student of the local school division, and I don't know if they would then remain truly a homeschool student at that point.
Thank you.
All right, Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chairman, in full disclosure, I voted against this bill. And there are a number of reasons. The first one is that I think this bill attempts to expand Virtual Virginia's pilot program, which already receives an appropriation. And if we expand that program, that appropriation will have to grow. And so it seems to me that the proper place for the bill is in appropriations in order to clarify that. Also, the bill to me is an unfunded mandate on schools. They're not giving schools any choice, and they're not providing choices for parents either. It limits the local schools to one additional option of a model. And that doesn't seem to me to be anything except a formula for failure. This model outlined in the substitute is very reminiscent of what happened in the state of Florida with virtual education. And for lack of a better term, it was disastrous. So I think at the very least, the bill needs to go to the 9th floor for review by appropriations. I think there are plenty of other questions about the bill. It looks to me as if the potential exists to create 132 virtual schools, and that's a little frightening. Also, the question of eligibility, if we want to discuss that, if a student is enrolled in his home school but takes his classes from schools in another division, which I believe the bill allows for, which school is he eligible to to participate for. It's a little cloudy. And finally, as for the question of constitutionality, we don't believe, the folks who support my bill and support us, a full-time virtual education, we don't believe that there ever was a question. Since we have an informal opinion dated 2013 from the Attorney General's office that says the model for House Bill 1400 is constitutional.
Delegate Greason.
Mr. Chairman, I'll finish my subcommittee report on this particular bill if you're all right with that.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did have a lengthy debate. I believe the points that were made were also covered in the subcommittee appropriately by both Delegate Bulova and Delegate Bell. Mr. Chairman, there was a recommendation of the subcommittee to report the substitute 4-3. The subcommittee chair, myself, voted no on the recommendation. Subsequently, Mr. Chairman, we have received a letter from Chairman Jones on the 9th floor that the proper motion should have been to report and refer. And since I haven't made a report or recommendation yet, I will now make one, that we should report and refer the bill to appropriations.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second to report and refer House Bill 1764 to the committee as a substitute to the Committee on Appropriations. We adopted the substitute. All right, Delegate Hoagie.
Since we really haven't, among us, all 21 of us, had a chance to really understand the differences as well, I would move that we refer the bill to appropriations.
Okay, that's a voice vote.
Mr. Chairman?
Delegate Cole.
Yeah, point of order. This bill clearly deals with education. And, I hate to say it, but, that we've gotten kind of in the habit of just referring bills without saying whether or not we think it's a good idea. I think it's our job, since these are educational bills, to voice our opinion on the policy of the bill before we send it upstairs. And it's upstairs, they're supposed to find out and see if we can afford it. I would just speak against the motion and simply refer the bill.
All right, is there a second to the motion to refer? All right, the motion before us is to report and refer, which would be, we would be acting on it from a policy standpoint and then moving it to the Appropriations Committee. Delegate Bullock. And I believe that's the motion before us.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm fine with having it go to appropriations. And in fact, I think with both bills going to appropriations, I think that'll allow a side-by-side comparison of what we're doing. I just did want to point out a couple of things on funding. My recollection from the discussion last year about virtual education is that it was held out that it's actually less expensive per pupil. And to the extent that that's the case, and you've got a state and local share, hypothetically, you should be able to save some funding at the local school district level. I'd also say that there's nothing in here that prevents a local school district from offering multiple online providers, so they can provide several of them if they want. What I think is key here, though, is that we make sure that they at least provide one, which is a far cry and a far step ahead of where we are today. And then lastly, we're not talking 132 virtual schools. We're making sure that we have several different contract vehicles that have been vetted by Department of Education that then localities can ride off of it. So we know that they're quality contracts. You have just a couple that you can deal with and choose from, but we're not setting up a whole bunch of these. It's very similar to the way that we do textbooks today with the Department of Education that negotiates the rates. Anyways, I appreciate your consideration. I do hope that you'll vote yes to make sure that this continues to move forward.
All right, any other members of the committee have a question? Secretary Trent, did you want to address the committee? I always want to invite members of the governor's cabinet. And you may have spoken to the subcommittee, but that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I do appreciate the opportunity to address you. I did, in fact, speak on behalf of Delegate Bulova's bill and committee, and so I really don't have a whole lot to add. I appreciate your support. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Secretary Trent. All right, the motion before us has been properly seconded, and we've adopted the substitute for House Bill 1764 is to report and refer the bill to the Committee on Appropriations. Any other members have a question? Anybody else in the audience that didn't speak on the legislation in committee, subcommittee? All right, all those in favor of reporting and referring the bill to the Committee on Appropriations,